Hello, organized labor.
U.S. President Joe Biden held his first political rally Saturday since launching his re-election campaign in April. He made his 2024 pitch to union members in Philadelphia. The AFL-CIO, which endorsed Biden this week, hosted the event. It includes 60 unions representing more than 12.5 million workers. Biden is aiming to shore up a key part of his political coalition and bolster support among white working-class voters.
A lot of politicians in this country who can't say the word union. As you know, I'm not one of them. I'm proud to say the word. I'm proud to be the most pro-union president in American history.
Biden has supported collective bargaining at companies, reversed rules implemented by his Republican predecessor and leading challenger Donald Trump that weakened worker protections, pushed to reverse a decades-long decline in union membership, and made it easier for union labor to build bridges and ports around the country. In his remarks, Biden talked up his $1.2 trillion infrastructure package, passed with bipartisan support in Congress. Infrastructure was the subject of a visit he made earlier in the day. Biden toured the scene of a collapsed section of the I-95 highway in Pennsylvania. He promised $3 million in initial emergency funding and pledged to rebuild it in record time.
We're going to stay with you, and this is rebuilt until it's totally finished. We're going to try to do that in as quick a time as possible. And I told the governor there's no more important project right now in the country as far as I'm concerned. I've directed my team, not figuratively but literally, to move heaven and earth to get it done as soon as humanly possible.
A section of I-95 was shut down in both directions after a tanker truck hauling gasoline caught fire on Sunday, causing the concrete to buckle and collapse. Authorities have not said precisely how the fuel was ignited. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Chinese Foreign Minister Qin Gang held what they called candid and constructive talks Sunday in Beijing, though they seemed to agree on little beyond keeping the conversation going. After a 5.5-hour meeting followed by a dinner, the State Department said Blinken stressed the need to reduce the risk of misperception and miscalculation, which was what he listed as his top objective for the meeting on Friday in Washington.
To establish open and empowered communications so that our two countries responsibly manage our relationship, including by discussing challenges, by addressing misperceptions, and avoiding miscalculations.
Chinese state media quoted Qin as having pointed out that the Taiwan issue is the core of China's core interests, the most important issue in Sino-U.S. relations, and the most prominent risk. Ties between the countries have deteriorated across the board, raising concern they might one day clash militarily over the self-governed island of Taiwan, which China claims as its own. The trip was the first visit to China by a U.S. Secretary of State in 5 years. Blinken postponed a February trip after a suspected Chinese spy balloon flew over U.S. airspace. He is the highest-ranking U.S. government official to visit since President Joe Biden took office in January 2021. Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping met in Bali in November. During his stay through Monday, Blinken is also expected to meet with China's top diplomat Wang Yi and possibly Xi. Blinken and Foreign Minister Qin plan to meet again in Washington at some future date.
Eyewitness video shows the aftermath of a deadly shooting in Willowbrook, Illinois, just after midnight Sunday. Police vehicles surround a parking lot where at least 20 people were shot, one of them fatally, during a Juneteenth celebration that had gone into the early hours. Police say they are still investigating the motive and number of shooters involved. Here's Deputy Chief Eric Swanson from the DuPage County Sheriff's Office.
Shortly before 12:30 a.m. on Sunday, June 18th, DuPage County Sheriff's deputies were in the area of Honeysuckle Rose Lane and Route 83 and heard numerous gunshots fired and responded to an area where a large gathering of people was happening.
The group had gathered in the area 24 miles outside of Chicago to celebrate Juneteenth, the newest U.S. federal holiday that commemorates the emancipation of enslaved Black Americans. One local resident described the chaos following the shooting.
There were sirens coming from every direction. There was just hundreds of cop cars from all the way at the light at 91st, just down here. It was just a lot.
James Bennett, who is black and Filipino, is a philosophy major at the University of California at Berkeley. He says he sees almost no one who looks like him on campus.
I am in a major that doesn't necessarily hold that many students of color. Throughout my entirety of being at Berkeley, I've only met 2 other black students within all of my classes I've been in.
California voters passed the ban on all consideration of race in college admissions, a practice known as affirmative action, in 1996. Since then, the state has spent more than $500 million to help create diverse student bodies across the University of California system. With some success, black student enrollment across the system rose to 5% last year. That number hovered at 3 or 4% for decades after the affirmative action ban. But these figures are still well below population figures. At Berkeley, the struggle to enroll black students has been particularly painful. Black students only account for 3% of the incoming 2022 freshman class. Administrators said the reason behind this lag is complex and not entirely known. Financial aid, however, is one of the issues. Berkeley is competing with top private schools like Stanford or Harvard, which have large endowments and can offer more in scholarships. They can also use affirmative action to admit students of varied ethnic backgrounds. John A. Powell is a law professor and director of Berkeley's Othering and Belonging Institute.
Berkeley's a great school, and I'm glad to be affiliated and teach here. But we're always scrapping for money. And as a public institution, the legislature is always taking money back.
He added that some black Berkeley graduates are hesitant to recommend the campus to young people who will find themselves in a small minority. The state-funded Bridges Multicultural Resource Center at Berkeley has worked to increase applicants from underrepresented backgrounds and then offer counseling and other support once they arrive. Alexis Conejo, born to a teenage mom in a Salvadoran refugee family and a C student in a high school, said the program helped her get into Berkeley.
In engaging with those students that put on programs like that, it in turn kind of retained me and made sure that I was not just on this campus, but had a community on this campus.
The U.S. Supreme Court is expected to rule this month in a pair of cases that could end affirmative action in college admissions nationwide. If that happens, universities that have used race-conscious admissions to boost enrollment of minority students will look to California, one of the 9 states that already prohibits such considerations at its public colleges.
Officials in Ukraine said the death toll from flooding following the destruction of the Kakhovka Dam has risen to 16, and Russian officials said 29 people have died in territories that Moscow controls. The breaching of the Kakhovka Dam on June 6 unleashed floodwaters across a large area of land in southern Ukraine and in Russian-occupied parts of Ukraine, destroying farmland and cutting off supplies to civilians. More than 3,600 people have been evacuated from the flooded areas in the Kherson and Mykolaiv regions, while 31 people were still missing and some 1,300 houses remain flooded. That's according to Ukraine's Interior Ministry. Here in Holopristan, a city in Russian-controlled Ukraine, volunteers were seen pumping floodwater out of homes on Saturday. This woman says her only hope is God. We don't put our hopes in any of the authorities, she says. Ukraine accuses Russia of blowing up the Soviet-era dam under Russian control since early days of its invasion in 2022. A team of international legal experts assisting Ukraine's prosecutors in their investigation said in preliminary findings on Friday it was highly likely the collapse in Ukraine's Kherson region was caused by explosives planted by Russians. The Kremlin accuses Kyiv of sabotaging the hydroelectric dam, which held a reservoir the size of the US Great Salt Lake, to cut off a key source of water for Crimea and distract attention from a, quote, faltering counteroffensive against Russian forces.